Welcome to Monterey County Pops Pros Teach. I'm Carl Christensen, the music director and conductor of Monterey County Pops. Our orchestra of fully professional musicians presents free concerts of pops and patriotic music throughout Monterey County. During the school year, we visit local schools and conduct clinics and workshops for student musicians in the afternoon. And in the evening, we perform together in a free concert for their community. We are committed to mentoring young musicians, and since we have not been able to visit schools since March, we have created this series of instrumental clinics. They will be broadcast once a week on Comcast Channel 24, and they will also be posted on our website, montereycountypops.org, along with downloadable exercises, tips, and other print material. Bienvenido a Monterey County Pops Pros Teach. Soy Carl Christensen, director musical de Monterey County Pops. Nuestra orquesta de músicos totalmente profesionales presenta conciertos gratuitos de música ligera y patriótica en todo el condado de Monterey. Durante el año escolar visitamos escuelas y realizamos clínicas y talleres para estudiantes músicos por la tarde, y por la noche presentamos un concierto conjunto para su comunidad. Para nosotros, la educación musical de jóvenes músicos es muy importante, y como no hemos podido visitar escuelas desde marzo, hemos creado esta serie de clínicas instrumentales. Se transmitirán una vez a la semana en el canal 24 de Comcast y también se publicarán en nuestro sitio web montereycountypops.org junto con ejercicios, consejos y otro material impreso descargable. And now enjoy our bass episode presented by a member of our bass section, Stan Poplin. Ahora disfruten de nuestro episodio de Contrabajo presentado por Stan Poplin.
Hi, I'm Stan Poplin. I'm here to talk about the double bass with you today. I want to talk a little bit about how I came to the double bass and how I came to learning about music, and a little bit about what happened to me in my life having dedicated myself to playing music. When I was very young, I could say I was born at a very early age, but at about 15, I had a twin brother that said he wanted to start a band, and he said he was going to play drums, and so I thought, okay, I'll play bass. And I made that choice because I thought it would be an easy instrument to teach myself. I was in a position where my family didn't have a lot of money, and it was a small town. There was not a lot of teachers, so I thought it's something I'm going to have to figure out on my own. And so it turned out to be a very intuitive decision on my part. It was based on the idea that the bass only plays one note when other instruments that are playing pitches play chords or lots of notes together. So I thought that would be a simplified role that I would play in music. And so therefore it turned out that it was pretty easy to teach myself to get started. So my family had a acoustic guitar that had nylon strings, and I would learn a few chords, and then I would sort of play on the bottom 4 strings because I'd seen bass players in videos play, and they play with their fingers and how they move their hand a little bit. And I would sort of just pick out lines on the bottom 4 strings of a guitar until I got some money together and I actually bought a bass guitar, and electric bass, that is to say. And so what I did at that point was I just, every day I came home from school, I was very motivated because I loved music. And I come home from school and I put records on the turntable, mostly Beatles records and rock records, and I would just play along with them and pick out the notes, try to find them on the fingerboard. That would be the fretboard at the time, and do the best I could to figure out the sequence of notes and learn the songs by ear. This turned out to be an excellent beginning for me, because when we learn language, we just imitate the people around us, our parents, and we start to form words, we start to hear them, and we start to learn how to speak just by imitating others. Now, I think I have found that playing music is very much like speaking language, in that we learn to play and then we learn how to read. Let me say it this way: when we learn to speak, we learn how to make sentences and communicate, and then at some point we learn how to read text and know how language works in written form. And so that parallels music in a very strong way, in my opinion. So I think it's very handy to learn how to play your instrument to a large degree, even before you start to learn to read notation or to learn about music very much, because then you have something to apply that information to. So that's what happened to me. Eventually I got into bands and through high school, and there was a double bass in my high school, and I got to go and play on that. And there was no teachers, and so I didn't know much about it. I just tried to do the best I could and apply what I did on electric bass to double bass, and eventually got interested in a wide variety of music. I had friends that played music, and one friend early on showed me the major scale. He showed me on guitar, and most of you who are, if you're playing this instrument and maybe you started on electric bass, you might finger it this way, using the 3rd finger. And so that's what, with all my students, I ask them, play me a scale, and that's the pattern everybody knows, and so it's very common. And that's a pattern I want to start by to show you today. But going from there, I just would say a little bit more about what happened to me in music. Was that I played in bands, and I graduated from high school, and I played with other players that were very good musicians, better than I was, and I learned a lot about how to play in blues music, how to feel 4 bars at a time, how to relate to the pulse of the music, and then relate rhythm, and then how to organize my thinking in terms of the major scale and how that dictated right notes to play against various chords. Even though I didn't know a lot about theory, I knew how to a good strategy about how to find good bass notes to play. And I could play in time, and I could play in the groove, and I developed all this natural ability to access and be in a musical situation. And then I started studying it really seriously once I went to college. And so what I found when I went to college was, they gave me names for things that I already knew what they were, but I didn't have the proper names for them. So it was very interesting for me to go study theory in college. And they also gave me a lot more information that I didn't have, but I built on what I had. So I had a solid foundation of my musical education because I could play my instrument already, and because I really knew about scales and everything about scales. So that's what I want to present to you today, is this idea about how scales are the foundation of, in so many ways, of what playing music is about, and playing your instrument. Because not only do the scales help you understand about music theory and about how to read music, but they also help you to understand how to play your instrument. It's very interesting if someone tells you, nitpicks and says, you must keep that finger there, and no, your fingers are spread out, and give you all these details about how technically to play your instrument, while you're still trying to figure out what it is I'm actually playing. I got to figure out the notes in the scale, the fingering, the shape of the pattern, and now I got to figure out the exact way to move my hand and hold the instrument and all that stuff. I like to start with, let's just learn the pattern of the scale. It's a shape of a pattern, and I think we have a representation of it. That'll probably come up on the screen as I'm speaking. And that shape, it looks like it's got frets on it. And so it's because it's on a grid. And it looks like this. I go 1, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1. And then I think I put 2 or 3 right there to 4. For this instrument, it's always 2. It's not 3 right here. So that little anomaly in my graphic is because I shared that with electric bass players, and so I didn't bother to take that out. But anyway, so everything on that pattern takes place within this little box position right here. And that's all the notes in the major scale, except for what's called the 3rd degree and the 6th degree. And to play those with that pattern, I have to shift. I'm shifting my whole hand position to there, and then I'm playing the next note in the pattern, and now I'm shifting the position back to the original position. Now I shift again. Now I finish up to the original position, and I finish off the pattern. So there's 2 shifts in that pattern. Shifting is when I move my hand from one position to the other. So that's how that pattern is achieved, and that's the shape of the pattern and the fingering of the pattern. Now, let's back up just a little bit and talk about how to hold the bass and how to achieve some of the technical things that I later want to address once we know all of these patterns that I want to share with you. I'm sitting with the bass right now, and I have the corner of the bass contacting my abdomen just to the left of my belly button. I have my knee back here helping to support the bass, and it's leaning against me. Some of the biggest mistakes early players make is they think they got to play out here. And look how uncomfortable that is with my wrist. I once played in an opera. I couldn't see the music very good, so I was playing like this, and I hurt my shoulder drastically. So we want to make sure that we have very good posture and be comfortable when we're playing. So way to do that is to have the bass kind of leaning close to us, next to our face right here, so that now I don't have a big bend in my wrist here. It's kind of nice and straight. My hand is very much like holding a beverage, your favorite beverage. I hope it's a glass of nice clean water, because that's my favorite, and tea. But some of you drink soda. So anyway, like holding a can or a glass, our thumb is right in the middle of our hand. So if I do that natural position of my hand, you can see my thumb is right there in the middle of my hand, and my hand is naturally curved, claw-like, and the 2 fingers in the middle are more or less together, and the outer fingers have a little bit of spread to them. The idea is that I have 1, 2, and 4. It's these 3 fingers that are the main power, or the main fingers I'm using on the double bass. It's different from electric bass. So that's why I put 1 to 4, and I don't want to have to reach like that out there. I have to shift my whole hand to go there so that I keep it in this nice, natural, and relaxed position. And now I'm going to play this next note, and then I'm going to shift back. So when I shift like that, my whole thumb goes exactly that distance as well. So I'm keeping my thumb exactly behind the middle of my hand at all times as possible. Let's go back and talk about that major scale one more time. It looks like, you'll see from the graph that was presented, now I'm doing it pizzicato, of course. When I practice this, it's very important to keep my fingers in this box position and nice and curved and relaxed. You can actually play just the notes in the first box and then practice playing the notes that are outside the box. Outside the box. Now I'm not moving back into the box here, I'm playing what note is available to me already. Now I'm moving back into the box, outside the box, and back into the box. Now, what if I did this? That's a different fingering to the same pattern. 1, 2, 4, or 1, 4, 4. I prefer 1, 2, 4 for a very specific reason. That is, in most music, and on an instrument like this that has no frets, that you want to be very attentive to intonation, it's very important to try not to shift to the last note that you're going to play. See, whether it's a phrase or the scale like this. So I get into practice by playing scales to actually shift to a finger that's going to let me finish in position. That's why I'm choosing that finger instead of going. It's not impossible, but it's reliable, more reliable if I do it that way. Now, part of what music is you can listen to music and you can hear parts of scales in it all the time, exclusively almost. But there's some other broken scales, or what are called arpeggios. It's the every other note of the scale. Actually, I have another graph that I want to show first before I talk about the arpeggios. It's the minor scale. So let me show you what the minor scale looks like. It's still this box position, and it's fingered a little bit differently. So this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, and that's a major scale. Minor scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Notice I'm shifting for those notes that are outside the box, and I'm keeping my hand in this nice relaxed claw-like position. The difference between a major scale and a minor scale, who knows that? Well, it's the major. It has 3 flats typically. The third is flatted by a half step, so it makes it minor. The 6th degree of the scale is flatted by a half step, and the 7th degree of the scale is flatted. So here's my major third in the key of C, and here's my minor third. It's actually right here as well, flatted by half a step. Because I want to put this in a nice little box position, there's another way I want to show you how to play that minor scale, or how to play all these scales, but for right now we'll talk about this initial way of playing the minor scale with this pattern. Here's the 5, and right there's the 6, but here's the flatted 6, so it's right here next to the 5. Sorry. 5, flat 6, and now it's not this major 7, but flatted 7th. So it's nice that when I finish that scale, I can reach up and reach across and play the octave. Octave means 8, of course, and so that's why that ensures that I have my hand in this nice position, my thumb's here, I'm nice and relaxed. I could even take a big breath to make sure I'm not getting too tense about playing, all right? So that's the difference between a major scale and a minor scale. Now, I'm sure your teachers in school will expand on that a little bit more and talk about the difference in the different sounds and other aspects of major versus minor. The one thing I want to point out regards to the double bass is they're all kind of just, there's this box position, and on the minor scale, there's a couple, I'm fingering it this way, a couple of pitches here. On a major scale, they're up here outside the box. So that's some aspects of the pattern that you can kind of notice and play around with. Now I'll mention arpeggios, because that's the third graphic that I had submitted to be presented. It's hopefully up right now, and this is going to be the pattern for the arpeggio for the major scale. Notice I'm starting now with the 2nd finger. Every other finger I used in that scale was the same that I used when I played the scale, but now when I'm playing the arpeggio, instead of starting with the 1st finger, I'm starting with the 2nd finger, only because I know that my very next move is to play the 1st finger on the 3rd. So this is inefficient, 1 to 1, I'll just start with 2. Now, if I was going to play the scale and the arpeggio, it might look like this. Here comes the arpeggio. I'm going to go to 2nd finger to set up, because I know I'm going to do that next. I'll just do that right fingering. All right, so that's how I combine those, and that is a very great place to start in playing, getting orientation to this fingerboard that doesn't have references of frets or position markers. Those position markers are those little white dots that you find on fingerboards. That's becoming more and more popular to see them on double basses these days. But when I grew up, they were never there, so I never bothered putting them on. Some people call them landing lights, because I'm way up here and I go, where am I going? And I go, oh, there's a landing light. I can figure out where I'm going. It's the cheater marks, but position markers is what they are. And they're fine to use. They're very common now. Let's see. So the minor scale arpeggio. Minor scale. Now I'm going to go, it's the same finger I used for the scale. I'm going to do just those every other note. 2, 1, 4. So that's the arpeggio for the minor scale. So now we have looked at the major scale and the minor scale and the corresponding arpeggios. Just with that information right there, that's a lot of stuff to incorporate and really learn about. And you could start by just playing those in every key and figuring out 1 octave scales in every key. And it's pretty remarkable to be able to say within a few weeks' time on your instrument, you could play a major and minor scale with an arpeggio in every key. That's not very usual with other instruments. It's a lot harder to do on other instruments. It's one of the advantages of the string instrument. So let's leverage off of that advantage, because we can really find our way around the instrument more and learn how all the different keys kind of lay on the instrument and how they connect to one another. And that's something we can learn very intuitively. So there's another pattern I want to show you for the major scale. That would be the 4th graphic that you'll see here now. And this major scale is on 2 strings, not 3, and it looks like this. You'll see that that covers a lot of ground up and down the neck, and because it has wider shifts, I have to make sure I'm shifting more accurately. That's what you'll find on playing a string instrument, is most of the intonation problems happen around the shifts, so we have to be very careful about that. Practice those diligently. So the major scale pattern on 2 strings. And the minor scale on 2 strings. That's the next graphic. Sorry. Flat 6. And then with that, I can do 2 octave scales. I can combine the 3-string pattern with the 4-string pattern. Watch this. This is the key of, let's do it in the key of F. Now F is a special case right down here because I can't shift up here to play that open string, so I'm just going to play it as an open string. That's the same pattern where I didn't have to shift down because they were open strings. And now I'm going to start that 2-string pattern with the first finger. Now I'm ending with the first finger. When I started that pattern before, I was on the 4th finger. So all I'm going to do is go to 2nd finger, and I'm in the position for the other pattern. So that's the 3-string pattern first, then the 2-string pattern, or let's do it in the key of C, and I'll show you, let's do it in B flat, and I'll show you the 2-string pattern first with the 3-string pattern second. I better do it in F. 2-string pattern. Two ways of playing the same 2-octave pattern. And so I would recommend you start with just 1 octave, and whether it's the 2-string pattern or 3-string pattern. And then later when you get those pretty familiarized, you can find different ways of combining them. And that helps you to have more range on your instrument. All of this, as I said before, speaks to the idea if I can play my instrument, if I could speak my language and learn how to use my mouth and my tongue and everything to make words, then when I learn to read notation, I already know what the words sound like. I can make that connection in my mind, how those letters sound. And we do this as we're learning to speak as well, as you know. Then I already have a foundation of being able to play my instrument and have a modicum of technique together that I can then apply and the notion of reading music notation and understand how all that works. I found that it really makes it easier. Okay, what I haven't talked about so far very much is the right hand, and that would be with connection of holding the bow or making pizzicato. So let's talk about the bow grip, which was called. And some people want to call it the bow hold so that we're not gripping it so hard. It's much like in the left hand, as I described, the relaxed nature of what you want to have when you're playing is in the left hand, again, claw-like, and it kind of looks like the shape of this hand and when I'm fingering, is that I want my thumb more or less in the middle and a nice claw-like position. I'm holding a French bow right now, so the German bow is quite a different grip, and I won't talk about it because I don't have a German bow here, other than it's overhand like this, and the thumb goes up on top, and there's a wider frog right here that allows your fingers to go inside, and it's played like this. Well, I specialize in playing the French bow, and so I hold it like this. And it's the bow from the other violin family that they use. And so what happens is we have our frog and our tip, and that's the basic orientation of the bow. And what I want to do is it's almost like someone said, it's like pulling a drawer open. If you just grab a drawer, I guess we grab a drawer like that mostly, but if I'm just naturally pulling something, my hand is in this shape. If I'm just going like this. And so what's happening is my thumb is bent like this, and I'm putting my thumb in this little crook in the frog. I don't know if that's very visible. I'll try to do it this way. I'll do it for the close-up mic. It's right there. Sometimes we're taught to put it right there on the edge, and I was taught later that down there is a nice place to put it. Sometimes I play with it all the way up here, so there's a lot of variation one can play around with where they place the thumb. But I put the thumb right there, and it matches right where my second finger is over this middle part of the frog. Then the middle two fingers are more or less together, and the outer two fingers are a little bit more spread out. If I hold my fingers really straight like that, you can see how tense my hand is. Whereas if I just relax my fingers, then all of a sudden, this is tense, this is relaxed. So that's what I want. If I hold my bow straight out like this, you can see that I'm not going like this, I'm going like this. And you can see my thumb is bent, this way. Okay, so that's how I want to fit the grip. That's the grip, and I want to fit the bow in my hand. Then the bow comes down and lays on the string, and we want to make sure that we don't have an odd angle. It's best to have, there's an acronym called WASP, weight, angles, pressure, speed. Did I say that right? Yes. And so it's the weight of my arm, the added pressure, right? So the weight of my arm, I'm not giving any more pressure. If I have more pressure with my muscle strength and my arm weight, that's a louder sound. Speed gives an accent. That's more energy going into the string through the bow. And angle. Angle is that I don't want to play like that. That doesn't give me any good sound at all. I want a parallel attitude of the bow on the string. Let me see if that makes sense if I'm standing up. Straight across. So those are just the most basic parts of the bow. It's very important to have a teacher that can show you about the bow and give you some more detailed information. But that's how to hold the bow, and we don't want to grip too hard because then we'll get sore in this here. If you find yourself holding the bow and you're sore in your palm of your hand, it's because you're gripping too hard. I had a teacher one time come up to me while I was playing. He just tried to grab the bow out of my hand, and he told me that if he could grab it out of my hand, then I'm not holding too tight. So maybe have a friend surprise you, but with that technique. But the idea is that I have a nice relaxed grip of my hand on the bow, and we want as much as possible all of our arm weight transferred into the bow. There's one other small aspect about the bow I'll mention is that all our power is here, and as I draw the bow out this way, the power is getting further away from where the contact of the string is. So I'm going to do a little torquing motion like you're turning a knob, a faucet or something like that with my whole forearm. As I'm drawing out this way, you can see now my grip looks like this. My thumb is the same, but I'm putting pressure on this first finger and torquing my hand to allow, maybe I'm doing a little bit with my elbow. And then when I come back, it's more natural. So I'm transferring weight by doing a torquing motion. It's really just a nice, if you're walking and your arm is just swinging, that's the kind of motion you want to have in your arm. You want to feel it hanging from your shoulder and all that arm weight going in there. So that's as much as I want to say about the bow, because it's, when I started playing pizzicato and playing jazz music and doing a lot of things before I even specialized in the bow. And when I took up the bow, I realized this is a whole nother instrument to learn how to play. So maybe it's a good idea to get something together here and learn how to play my instrument and then add this other instrument. You guys that listen to this are probably smart enough that you can do both at once. But even when you practice, you might want to practice one at a time till you get used to putting the two things together. My point is that this is a very complex instrument to use, but it's so beautiful. There's so many things I can do with it that I can't do pizzicato. Now, when I'm playing pizzicato, as I do in jazz music and even classical music, there's a different kind of pizzicato that happens in classical music versus jazz. If I'm playing in classical music and I have a pizzicato direction, so you can see I was holding the bow and I was using my second finger to do that pizzicato there. But it's this kind of sound. It's kind of a real natural just plucking the string. By the way, when we're plucking the string, we're kind of going from one side to across the string. The strings don't vibrate back and forth like this. They vibrate in a circle. So I'm kind of just dragging one side of the string and I'm pulling across it like that because that gets it going in a circle. Okay, so that's the kind of nature of pizzicato that happens in classical playing, or classical style of playing. But in jazz playing, it's a little bit louder, and there's a lot of different kinds of sounds that one makes. And generally, I use from this top whole part of the flesh of this part of my finger here to pluck the string. More from the side of my string. I'm getting more flesh on the string. And that helps me to get a bigger sound, whether I'm using an amp or playing acoustic. So therefore, and my thumb is going right on the end of the fingerboard, back of the fingerboard. That's just using my first finger. Well, I want to use two fingers. Let's try that again. I can do that. Sometimes when I'm playing, that gives me a nice fat, round sound. Sometimes when I'm playing particularly melodies or faster passages, I want a more articulate sound, and I'll use the tips of my fingers. And now I'm going not vertical with the string, I'm going parallel to the string, and more like electric bass plays it, and I'm using just the tips of my fingers, and I'm playing like that with my thumb, not in the back, but on the side. So. When I first started, no one told me about pizzicato. I just saw that people were using pizzicato, and so as I told earlier in this story, I just started using whatever finger seemed right and didn't think about it, and it was very intuitive. Even now, I don't think about what finger I'm starting with, but I have studied different ways of starting with one finger or the other and doing string crossings and figuring out ways that can be more efficient one way or the other, given the passage that I'm trying to learn how to play. So you can practice your scales. I'm alternating every finger. Starting with the first, I just switched off. So, and even as I do that, I'm finding there's some variation in that, so it's intuitive. All right, so that's a little bit about pizzicato. And in jazz music, I want to talk a little bit quickly about pizzicato, or about how the bass's role in jazz music. Because so far, there's some things that we could benefit from knowing when we're trying to play jazz. Now, our knowledge of scales helps us to understand everything about, begin to understand about theory and how chords are made and how chords are related to each other. When we're playing in a jazz situation, mostly we're playing a bass line, and that bass line sometimes is written out for us, but sometimes we just have to make it up as we go along. There is a graph that I submitted. It's called All Blues, and it's the last one. It's number 8 in the series. I've skipped over number 7. Maybe I'll come back to it. But there's a tune called All Blues that was by Miles Davis, and it has a bass line that sounds like this. So you can see my pizzicato fingers I'm going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's kind of a... So there's a coordination between the left and the right hand that really has to be intuitive, and that takes a little bit of practice. But again, that happens when you're just playing scales, you're playing pizzicato, and then with the bow later. That's a really nice tune. I want to talk really quickly about what that is. It's a blues. And a blues is a form of music that is found in jazz music and blues music itself. And it consists of 3 4-bar phrases. The first phrase happens on the first chord. It's called the 1 chord. The second 4-bar phrase goes to the 4 chord for 2 bars and then goes back to the 1 chord for 2 bars. That's the second 4-bar phrase. The third 4-bar phrase is the most active in blues, is that it typically goes from 5 down to 1 to 4 and back to 1 and back to 5 again. So it almost moves every bar. Where did I get those numbers 1, 4, and 5? They come from the major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm using those numbers of the major scale to tell me when I'm playing in a progression, I'm on the 1 chord, the chord of the key, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go to the 4 chord. That's the chord that's based on the 4th degree of the scale in the key that I'm playing on. So that represents a little bit of a more macro view of the scale. So that's how the blues progression works, and a tune by Miles Davis called All Blues. There's so much resources we have today for you guys to look on YouTube. You can search for bass lessons from various different kinds of teachers and search all these tunes out and listen to lots of examples of music. So I highly recommend you use that resource and expose yourself to this kind of music. It's really beautiful. My life has been just a treasure. I've lived abroad I lived in Norway for 5 years. I've traveled all over the country and a lot of places in the world playing music. It's taken me a really fantastic journey. And I really love music, and it's helped me to love the people that I'm working with and to play with, and it's really made me appreciate this life that music is a part of. And I hope that you are able, as you develop in your musicianship, to find some of the advantages and opportunities that I have. And most of all, find the joy of sharing music with one another. Because when we learn music, we're taking our time to learn something and then share it with someone else. And hopefully share it with a loving nature that I want to share it and help you feel good because I find it interesting. Maybe you'll like it too. So I hope that helps you. And when you find a music teacher, if you've already done this work, it's going to put you in a really good position to proceed from there. So thanks for being a listener of this video. I'm happy to present this material. And that's it from your friend, Stan Poplin.